The Anunnaki created us as a slave species. The Bible reveals that we were created from divine hands in the image and likeness of God, the All-Powerful. But this is not true. We were created by the Elohim, a plurality of gods. And we were not born out of love or spiritual enlightenment. We were designed and engineered to be slaves. In the depths of ancient Mesopotamia, inside a sacred laboratory known only to the gods, we were forged through genetic manipulation. Our DNA fused with that of celestial beings, not for evolution, but for utility. We were created to work, to serve, to mine gold for the gods. This wasn't a spiritual awakening. This was a corporate operation on a planetary scale. And at the heart of it all was Enki, the scientist god, who would challenge divine law to create a being capable of labor, a being called Adamu. But as the chains of gold mining gave way to temples and priesthoods, something else was born, a system far more insidious than servitude, an illusion of freedom. This isn't mythology. This was the beginning of control. There was a time when Earth was not home to man. Only beasts roamed the wilds, and the gods who came from the stars labored in silence. They were the Anunnaki, dispatched from their dying world, Nibiru, on a mission not of mercy, but of necessity. Their target? Gold. A rare element that could stabilize their planet's failing atmosphere. The deposits were found deep in the lands of the Abzu, what we now call Africa. But the mining was merciless, and even gods can break. The Igigi, the labor force of the Anunnaki, toiled for millennia in the scorching mines. They dug, they carried, they obeyed. Until they didn't. One night, under the cover of darkness, they rebelled. They rose in fury, weapons in hand, torches blazing against the black sky. Their chant echoed across the earth, "We will not toil for eternity." They stormed the command posts. They surrounded Enlil's compound. They demanded release. The gods were shaken. Order had crumbled. This was not a dispute. It was mutiny. Enlil, commander of the Earth mission, was enraged. "Let them be punished. Let the rebels be destroyed," he decreed. But not all agreed. Enki, lord of the waters, scientist of life, stood against his brother. "If they will no longer serve," Enki said, "then let us create those who will." A silence fell over the assembly. Not punishment, creation. Not through war, through science. The council gathered at Nippur, the central command. Anu, king of Nibiru, joined remotely from the heavens. The debate was fierce, but in the end, the plan was approved. Not all were convinced. Some said it violated cosmic law. Others feared what might evolve. But the decision was made. Engineer a primitive worker. Replace divine hierarchy with manufactured obedience. Yet beneath the surface of this decision, hidden behind Enki's calm words and scientific rationale, something else was brewing. Because Enki's plan wasn't just to solve a labor crisis, he was about to reshape destiny. The council disbanded, orders were issued, and the gods turned not to prayer, but to the laboratory. Beneath the ziggurats and beside the sacred waters lay a facility the humans would one day forget, the House of Life. It was here that the Anunnaki abandoned the divine and embraced the forbidden. Enki led the charge. With him stood Ninhursag, the womb goddess, the healer of flesh. Beside them, the silent scribe of life, Ningishida, keeper of the genetic codes. And watching from the shadows, Damkina, also known as Ninki, mother of Marduk, bearer of the royal seed. They gathered not in temples, but in chambers of glass and stone. This was not creation through magic, it was engineering. The plan was radical. Fuse the essence of the Anunnaki with the flesh of a wild earth creature, Homo Erectus. And so began the forbidden sequence. The first attempts were grotesque, misshapen bodies, mindless husks, breathing but broken. Some lived hours, others not at all. They screamed in confusion, crawled without purpose, died without meaning. Ninhursag wept. "These are not fit to serve," she said. "We have made flesh, but not function." But Enki would not yield. Then, success. A hybrid emerged, upright, responsive, obedient, not wild, not divine, but something in between. They called him Lulu, the mixed worker. He could understand commands, he could perform labor, but he was sterile, a tool, not a people. The mines resumed, the Igigi returned to orbit, but Enki was not satisfied. A sterile species was a dead end, temporary relief, not a solution. He began phase 2. This time it would not be a prototype, it would be a model, a reproducing being. Adamu was formed, not in tubes but in Ninhursag's womb. He was born, not just created. And then came Tiamat, the female. Her embryo carried by Damkina herself, royal womb of the Enkiite line. Now they had two, male and female, capable of reproduction, capable of learning, capable of building and obeying. They were placed in Eden, the divine-controlled zone in Mesopotamia, not to rule, not to roam, but to serve. They were taught to speak, to sow, to dig, taught to respect the gods, not as protectors, but as masters. And from Adamu and Tiamat would come the first generation of humans. This was not the dawn of enlightenment, it was the dawn of enslavement. The gods had solved their problem, and we had just begun ours. But what the gods created, they did not agree upon. Adamu and Tiamat served. They obeyed, reproduced, and toiled. The mission was back on track. The gold flowed from the mines once again. But above it all, two forces began to clash, not with swords, but with ideologies. Enlil, Lord of Command, saw what had been made and recoiled. To him, these creatures were dangerous, too clever, too adaptable, too close. "We gave them our essence," Enlil warned. "We have made a species that could rival the gods." He refused to enter Eridu again. He called it an abomination. He imposed limits, cut their lifespans, restricted their knowledge, removed their freedoms. The humans would serve, but they would not rise. To Enlil, this was not cruelty. It was containment, order, stability, a divine firewall against chaos. But Enki saw it differently. He had shaped them with care, watched them struggle, listened to their questions, and he saw something sacred. "They are not just tools," Enki said. "They are potential." Where Enlil imposed law, Enki offered learning. He gave humans language, symbols, stars, agriculture, math. He didn't just create workers, he awakened minds. And the divide between the brothers grew. One saw control as salvation, the other compassion as evolution. This wasn't just a family rift, it became the foundation of human fate. Because as the gods warred above, their ideologies filtered down into us. Even today you feel it, the tension between order and rebellion, between obedience and questioning, between fear of the gods and the fire of freedom. We inherited more than DNA. We inherited their conflict. And while Enlil tightened the chains, Enki looked beyond the laboratory. He turned his gaze to the wild humans, the early hybrids, the forgotten offspring, and he stepped into the unknown. As Enki stepped beyond the laboratory, the world began to shift. His secret unions with wild women, unauthorized, unapproved, set in motion a chain of genetic awakenings. The bloodlines grew, the hybrids evolved, intelligence deepened, the gods watched, and tensions rose. But it wasn't just Enki pushing boundaries anymore. Marduk, his son, married a human woman, Sarpanit, and legitimized the divine-human bond. And when the Igigi, the Watchers, saw this, they rebelled too. Led by Shamgaz, they descended in mass. They took women, bred children, and from them came the Nephilim. Giants, tyrants, monsters, not guided by ritual, but by instinct, power, and violence. The earth cracked under their weight, temples fell, cities trembled. The divine experiment spiraled into contamination. Enlil saw no redemption. "Let the waters rise," he said. "Let the storm cleanse the world." It was not rage, it was strategy. A celestial alignment was approaching, an astronomical catastrophe, and Enlil chose silence. No warning, no mercy, no escape. But Enki found a loophole. He couldn't break the oath, but he could whisper. To Ziusudra, born of his secret union with Batanash, Enki sent a dream. "The earth will flood, build an ark, take the seed of all life, preserve what must not be lost." Ziusudra obeyed, and when the deluge came, tidal waves, fire, thunder, it was not myth. It was reset. The Nephilim drowned, the watchers vanished, the records were washed clean. But from the chaos, one vessel remained. Ziusudra survived, with animals, caretakers, knowledge. When the waters receded, the gods descended in silence. They were not triumphant, they were shaken. Even Enlil, who had ordered the flood, was moved by the resilience of man. So they forged a new covenant. Never again shall mankind be destroyed. But this was not a gift of freedom. It was a restructured control. They would no longer rule by presence, but by proxy. They would give kingship, not earned, but lowered from heaven. Temples would rise again, not as sanctuaries, but as control centers. Humanity was spared, but the chains were simply made invisible. The skies cleared, the waters sank, but Earth was forever changed. The Nephilim were gone, the Watchers fallen and forgotten, the wild lines washed clean, and at the center of what remained stood one man, Ziusudra, the hidden son of Enki, the preserver of blood, the bridge between what was and what could be. He had not just survived the flood, he had outlived the purge. The gods could no longer deny it. Humanity could not be erased. So they chose a new path. Rebuild, but control. Ziusudra was taken to a place beyond ordinary lands, the land of the crossing, a sacred zone where the divine met the earthly. There he was given knowledge, longevity, secrets. He would not be king, but his descendants would be. From his bloodline, the gods would restart civilization. But this time, there would be no open rule. No more Anunnaki walking freely among men. Instead, kingship was lowered from heaven. Cities were founded. Kish, Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, each ruled by humans, but chosen by gods. These kings were not elected. They were not rebels or conquerors. They were descendants of the divine. Their authority came not from swords, but from bloodlines and ritual. Temples rose where control stations once stood. Priests replaced commanders. Ritual replaced regulation. It looked like spirituality, but it was strategy. The Anunnaki had withdrawn into shadow, but their systems, their symbols, their laws, their calendar, their control remained. They had shifted from visible gods to invisible rulers. And civilization? It didn't rise, it was reconstructed. From the ashes of catastrophe, the illusion of freedom began. Temples rose, kings ruled, but beneath every crown lay a question. What were we really? We spoke of gods. We worshipped names like Enlil, Enki, Inanna, Marduk, but those names weren't myths. They were designers. They were engineers. And we were their product, not born of divine love, not shaped by spiritual ascension. We were engineered, fused from the raw biology of Earth and the essence of Nibiru. We are hybrids. Our ancestors didn't evolve naturally in the forests and caves. They were created in chambers, inside the house of life, by beings with the power to edit DNA before our species even knew fire. The Sumerian tablets tell us this. Clearly, they name names, they give dates, they describe the labs, the leaders, the mission, and yet, the world doesn't know. Why? Because those tablets lie hidden in museum basements, in restricted archives. Some have been excavated yet never translated, others translated but never published. Too controversial, they say, too disruptive. Because if this truth were fully known, that we were created as a slave species by extraterrestrial gods, it would shatter everything: religion, history, identity, control. The very systems built to rule us would unravel. So instead, they gave us a sanitized myth, a God of light and love who made us in his image. But the tablets say otherwise. We were not made in the image of one God. We were modeled by many, the Elohim, and we were not made to love. We were made to serve. But then comes the real question. Did they give us something they didn't intend? A spark, a consciousness, a defiant strand of curiosity that made us look back at the stars and wonder, why? Were we made just to mine and obey, or were we meant to awaken? And if we were seeded, could they return, to reclaim what they left behind, to reset the system again, or to witness what their creation has become? One thing is certain. We are not random, we are not natural, we are the legacy of gods, but the story isn't finished, and the real war, the one between control and freedom, is still being fought, inside us. If all of this feels too vast, too mythic, too forbidden, then let's pull back the curtain, because this story isn't born from fantasy. It's not just myth recycled through whispers, it's written, inscribed in clay tablets that predate the Bible by thousands of years. Texts like the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, the Eridu Genesis, they don't speak in metaphor, they document. They describe gods arriving from the sky, creating humans, assigning labor, building cities, and ruling Earth. The Book of Genesis, once considered the first revelation, suddenly looks like a distorted echo of much older tales. Let us make man in our image. Not singular, plural, the Elohim. Even the story of the flood in Genesis mirrors, detail for detail, the Sumerian account of Ziusudra. And then came one man who dared to say it out loud. Zecharia Sitchin, linguist, researcher, rebel. He connected the dots that scholars refused to touch. He translated what was ignored, questioned what was forbidden, and from his work, a new lens emerged. Not myth, not metaphor, but ancient history, viewed through the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement. Of course, they mocked him. They labeled it pseudoscience, but they never disproved it. And here's the truth. Many of the tablets he referenced are real. They sit in museums, in archives. Some remain untranslated, others translated and silenced. Why? Because they rewrite everything we've been taught. That gods walked with men, that humans were engineered, that kingship was a system, not a right, that the divine never left, only went underground. So yes, the gods are gone. The spacecrafts no longer hover in plain sight, but their institutions remain. Temples turned to churches, priests to politicians, command to creed. We no longer mine gold, we mine belief. We don't serve in chains. We serve in rituals, in laws, in dogmas passed down from the age of gods. The story didn't end, it just changed costumes. And the legacy? It still lives in us, and in the systems that were never meant to set us free. The gods left, but their ideas did not. And behind every temple, every throne, every holy book or political system, we can trace two opposing forces. Two visions, two bloodlines, two gods, Enki versus Enlil. Their feud wasn't just divine drama. It was the blueprint of human civilization. Enki, the scientist, the liberator. He gave humans knowledge, language, healing, and rebellion. He broke the rules to preserve humanity during the flood. He saw potential, not just utility. To his followers, the Enkiites, he was a beacon of freedom. They stood for knowledge over ignorance, evolution over obedience, symbiosis with the divine, not subjugation under it. And then there was Enlil, the commander, the enforcer. He believed in order, hierarchy, purity of divine blood. He wanted humans obedient, limited, controlled. His followers, the Enlilites, ruled with sacred law, demanded fear, and built structures not to teach, but to command. They stood for law over learning, faith over freedom, punishment over compassion. And here's the truth, hidden in plain sight. Every empire, every religion, every government reflects this ancient schism. The priest who tells you to obey without question, Enlilite, the prophet who urges you to awaken. Enkiite, the church that forbids curiosity, Enlilite, the mystic who speaks of stars and inner light, Enkiite. We, as a species, inherited their feud, and now we live it, politically, spiritually, internally. Even now, your beliefs, your instincts, your doubts, they echo the war of your creators, because you are not just the product of genetic fusion, you are the battlefield of divine ideologies. And the war is far from over. They said it was sacred, they said it was divine, but what if religion wasn't born from spirit, but from strategy? What if the systems we've worshipped for thousands of years were never meant to connect us to the gods, but to keep us obedient to them? Let's be clear. Rituals, dogmas, symbols, saviors. They weren't born in moments of cosmic enlightenment. They were engineered, brick by brick, verse by verse, by beings who understood one thing better than anyone. Control begins in the mind. The Anunnaki didn't just build humans, they built belief. They replaced the memory of genetic manipulation with myths of divine grace. They rewrote the lab as a garden. The engineers became gods, the creators became masters, and the slaves were taught to worship their designers. Enlil wanted order, so he gave us laws. He wanted fear, so he became God Almighty. He wanted silence, so he gave us priests to speak for him. And we accepted it. Across continents and cultures, religions rose, not spontaneously, but systematically. Each one echoing the same codes: obey without question, fear divine punishment, sacrifice to please the unseen. This isn't spirituality, this is programming. A code implanted deep into the consciousness of mankind, and for millennia, it worked. But not all were asleep. Some heard the static behind the hymns, some saw the cracks in the stories, some realized real spirituality does not come from outside. It rises from within. It doesn't require temples. It doesn't bow to idols. It does not beg for forgiveness from creators who lied. True awakening begins with deprogramming. Only when we shed the layers of inherited belief can we begin to remember what we really are. Not servants, not sinners, but sparks of a truth far older than any scripture. They told us we were free. They gave us democracy, currency, religion, and choice, and called it liberation. But were we ever truly free? Look around. The chains are gone. But the systems remain. We don't serve gods in temples anymore. We serve corporations, governments, ideologies, different names, same control. We believe we are free because we can choose between brands, because we vote every few years, because we scroll through endless feeds. But what is choice when every option is manufactured by the same hands? What is freedom when the very framework of your life, your work, your faith, your beliefs, was inherited from systems built by those who once declared themselves gods? We still worship, but now we call it celebrity, status, success. We still offer sacrifice, but now it's our time, our labor, our identity, traded for survival in a system not of our making. We are not in temples, We are in offices, in debt, in algorithms that tell us what to want before we've even asked. The gods no longer descend from the skies. They hide in institutions. They speak through culture. They rule through inheritance. We are not chained by force. We are bound by belief. And that's the genius of it. Because the most powerful form of slavery is the one you don't see. So what is freedom? Is it the right to choose a leader every few years? To pick between chains of gold or chains of steel? No, freedom is not choice. It is clarity. It begins the moment you open your eyes, not to what they've built around you, but to what they've built inside you. It is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is illumination, the light that burns through the myths, the rituals, the stories that were never yours to begin with. As long as you speak their prayers, follow their laws, fear their wrath, you are still owned by systems designed long ago, by beings who didn't want gods beside them, but servants beneath them. True freedom? It's when you stop worshiping what was built to contain you. When you realize that divinity was never above, it was within. That you were not made to obey, you were made to awaken. Because the final act of liberation isn't escape. It's seeing the prison for what it is. And once you see it, you're already free.